Hello, everybody. I'm Jeff Ernst with Orange Tree Employment Screening, the Vice President of Sales and Marketing. We're delighted to have you today for our Return to a Safe Workplace webinar. We have a webinar monthly. We typically go through a presentation deck. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. I have several introductory slides, and then I am just delighted to have a couple of experts from our organization available to join me. We'll kind of talk through some different topics and give you different points of view over the next 30 minutes or so regarding the underpinning topic of how do you return to a safe workplace given all the different things that are going on today. So there's some of the talking points of what we'll go through, and we'll be sure also, if you do have questions, there's the ability for you to enter those in the side panel of the webinar screen. Be sure to get those in. If we don't get to your questions during the course of the webinar, we definitely will follow up with you individually following the webinar today. So today's speakers, joining me is Heidi Seaton and Dave Peterson with Orange Tree. Heidi's our Vice President of Compliance and Legal, and her role at Orange Tree is ensure that our offerings, processes, and deliverables are compliant. Dave is our Director of Client Success. Many of you work with him, I would imagine, daily, and it's probably nice to put a face to a name. And obviously, Dave is here to deliver upon your expectations and ensure that our deliverables are meeting the needs of our clients on a day-to-day business. This is from the sales and marketing point of view, the Miranda rights of our webinar. Heidi requires it. So it's our disclaimer. I'll say it for Heidi because I like to, and that is she is a lawyer, just not yours, but she can give you a lot of expert opinions on the subjects we're going to go through today. So with that, just for those of you that may be new to Orange Tree, and a reminder to some of our clients that we're in business really for one reason, and that is we believe every company deserves a background screening program designed solely for their best interest. It's all about you. It's about what you need, and we believe if we serve that purpose at the beginning, in the middle, at the end of the day, that our goals will be reached as a company. Nothing new here. Screening out through the employment life cycle, we've always had background checks. That's why we're in industry. Before someone hires, you run a check just to verify that the things they're telling you and the type of person that you believe that they are. And then over the course of time, depending upon the industry you're in, for instance, healthcare, there's a lot of certifications, licenses that need to be maintained in order for you to be compliant as a business and whatnot. It's important for you to have a process in place to look at that information, ensure that it's current over the employment life cycle. Sometimes it's monthly, sometimes it's annually. It probably depends on your point of view as well as some of the requirements that you have specifically for those licenses and certifications. Another common situation is for DOT regulated positions. You need to have current information on drivers, for instance, and so there's driver monitoring. Many of you are probably already doing that. What's newer to the industry and something that's created a lot of interest for our clients over the course of the last year, and it's kind of a confluence of two things, really. There's a lot of different things going on in our society with different events where workplaces, all of a sudden, the safety of them have been interrupted for different situations. At the same time, or maybe in parallel with that, there has been an evolution of technology where we have the ability as background check providers, or at least those who are investing in this technology, and we believe we've been investing at the forefront of this capability. There's now a confluence of expectation, need, interest, as well as technology to deliver near real-time criminal monitoring. And so under our Constant Connect portfolio, we have a number of services, whether it's sanctions, whether it's some of the things I mentioned with licenses, certifications, and driver monitoring, but now we are also offering our customers the ability to get more current information related to employee criminal activity. So if that's something of interest to you, please feel free to reach out to any of us on the call today. And if you're an existing client, certainly a client success team or client success partner would be delighted to talk to you about that. And really, kind of at the core of today's presentation, as we go through some of the things that are on our mind, because they're on the minds of our clients, you'll see that the phrase, or really the idea, the implementation of monitoring can be part and parcel to something that you may decide is useful as you get prepared to return to work as things shift and pivot back to normalcy and the economic and stats within our country. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our panel experts today. And under the umbrella theme, there'll be a variety of things that we touch upon. How our employer is going to get ready to return to work, Heidi. Would you kind of start the discussion for us?
Sure. Yep. And we're really talking about background screening considerations, right, for returning to work. That's kind of our area of expertise. So I think that's where I'll keep my comments. We know you're HR professionals, right? So you have a lot going on with getting people back into a safe environment. But we thought we'd just share a little bit about what we're seeing from the screening industry side. And we thought too, it might be helpful to just set some baseline definitions here. We know people use the terms furlough and laid off, sometimes interchangeably, sometimes talk about separation, sometimes you might be talking about a shared worker type of relationship with state with unemployment. So we just thought for the purposes of our discussion today, the three different groups we think employers should be thinking about or taking into consideration are, for instance, your people that are now working from home, right? You probably had most of your employees were working in an office, somewhere on site, and it's very likely, given all the shelter in place and safer at home regulations that have gone into effect over the last 6 weeks, that you've got or longer, that you've got some group of people that normally used to come into the office, now they're at home or somewhere else. So we're including in that group of people those that maybe just they're working from home. There might be a reduction in hours, so you might just not have as good a track of those employees as you did when they were coming into your office 40 hours a week, every business day, that sort of work. And then our second sort of category of employees we're going to talk about are the furloughed employees. So by that, we just mean those where there's some sort of reduction in hours, or maybe they're not working at all, but they're still on your payroll. They're still getting benefits such as health insurance. And then there's those that are actually laid off, right? During this time of mass layoffs, sometimes there's an expectation that they're going to be hired, but not always, right? Sometimes layoff just means separation, termination. There is no guarantee or expectation of a rehire, but there is also the understanding with the layoff usually that it's not for cause, right? It's something that's happening with that employer's business or change in business like we've experienced. So those are our three sort of baseline definitions. We'll try to keep to using that terminology, but Dave, anything to add?
No, I think you hit it. Back in when all of this started, the interesting part of all of this was that times changed very fast, and the questions we received weren't necessarily about, what are we going to do now where we're at, but more about how do we continue to do our processes and hire people appropriately. So, as time has worn on, we're starting to see more of these questions, which led us to this point where how do we get back to work? So, yep. But it was very important to define the different aspects of employment status before we could talk.
And then we understand, by the way, that this is not a legal definition. Your state statute or your state definitions might be different than how we're using it here today. We were just trying to come up with some common terms to use.
So go ahead. Go ahead, Jeff.
Let's take the mic here. Just let's step through some of the things our clients have asked us to think through, consider, and maybe we can do a little bit of Dave, what people are considering from a point of view, what people are implementing. Heidi, kind of the might consider, should consider from a compliance perspective. That'll be kind of the roles that you would expect, and Heidi and Dave will play today. So whoever wants to kind of take the ball and take us into what are these things we have to be thinking about.
So the questions that we started receiving more recently is, clients are starting to see the safe at home, stay at home orders being lifted. And one of the general aspects is, as we prepare to bring more people back into the workforce, either returning from a furlough or coming back from a work at home status, or even to Heidi's point, those layoffs, how do we know that we're going to be able to ensure a safe workplace? How do we know that we're able to hire the right people in light of all that's changed in the environment? And so the kinds of questions are how do we, are there avenues that we can supplement our employees to know and be secure in that knowledge? Another aspect that we're hearing a lot about is, as we've continued to hire new individuals with all the court closures that we've had, how do we get a better idea of what a person's background if I can't complete, due to a court closure, if I can't complete a screen? So there's a few avenues that we've put together to be able to look more deeply into that, and so taking it at one section at a time, I think, is the best way to go. So in working from home scenarios, it seems to all of us that I'm at home, I can't do anything that might get me in trouble, or but you never know. And so when we talk about this, when we talk about Constant Connect, the criminal monitoring piece is something that comes into play. And under our criminal monitoring, we've talked about a national criminal record search, a national sex offender registry, and for our regulated industries and the exclusion list, the OIG or the GSA, and we'll get into those definitions here in a moment. Other aspects of monitoring that are important are your driver monitoring. So that would be something that we can do to look at, speeding tickets and other types of activity on a person's current driver's license. And then employment verification. This is kind of an offhanded process, but when we're talking about individuals that may have had reduced hours, or are working from home, in some instances, we've had clients asking us about, well, how do I know if they're moonlighting or not? And are they going to be available when we're back to a scenario where we need our staff on full time and completely focused? So these are some of the items that we've had conversations about. And to break it down a little bit further on that front, specific to the newer candidates or newer employees where you've brought somebody on board on a contingency basis prior to having a completed criminal check in those counties where the courts were closed, having the National Criminal Record Search and the Sex Offender Registry monitoring adds or can add, I'm trying to be careful because I don't want to step on the compliance toes here, can add a certain level of information about your candidates on an ongoing basis until you're able to complete that criminal search, until we're able to resubmit the background check through those county courts that are not open. Okay, so that's the working from home piece. Heidi, did you have anything you wanted to?
Sure. Well, maybe I'll just dive in with some things employers could be thinking about there. I think the first question employers should be asking themselves is they're thinking about screening for people that are returning from work from home, and for all of these solutions we're going to talk about actually are thinking about your policy, right? You have a background screening policy. Is now a good time to take a look at it? Does it talk about, for instance, only doing a pre-employment background check, or does your policy allow you to do ongoing screening during the entire life cycle of the employee? is now a good time to just take a look at that policy and see if there's anything in it that needs to be updated. Even if you decide you're maybe you don't have anything to do with your workers work from home coming back, it might still be a good time to be thinking about monitoring just in general, right? So once people come back into the office, or maybe you decide, you know what, work from home has worked really well for us, and we're going to continue to have people working from home. But now you're not actually making eye contact with that person 8 hours a day, right? Like you don't have eyes on that person when they are at home. And so there might be some different risks there that you haven't had to think about before. And so maybe monitoring makes more sense for your people that are going to continue to work from home. And maybe it makes sense to implement now for people that are working from home if you are in one of those states where it's looking like it's going to be another 4, 6 weeks or 8 weeks or more before return from work really happens. Dave had mentioned if you're hiring people contingent on the background check and the background check isn't completed, right? So if you're in one of those 2 states where there's a court that just is completely shut down and we just can't get information there, it might be a good time to be looking at your offer letter templates, right? Having counsel review those and look at that language specifically. You know, is it clear that in the past, I've seen contingency letters where it talks about the fact that starting work is contingent on completion of the background check. Maybe it needs to be language that's more like work and your continued employment is contingent on successful completion of the background check, even if the background check isn't complete when you actually start work for pay, right? So maybe just thinking about, is there any language in there that we should be looking at broadening to sort of fit our current circumstances or to fit any circumstances that we might see coming down the road here. I think that was my comments for that. If you want to move on to what we're thinking about for furloughed or laid off employees.
Sure. So on the furloughed side of things, you know, this is a very different scenario. You've got a group of employees that are essentially still they are your employees, but they're not active in their work. They're pretty much off the payroll, not being paid, and they're not actively engaged in the work. And that's one of those situations where you know, paying a little extra attention, you have even less visibility into the day-to-day aspects of these individuals. So again, the National Criminal Record Search, Sex Offender Registry are great pieces to add into getting a general knowledge base of your employees, OIG and GSA monitoring, or your exclusions lists, and you know, having the driver monitoring as well, it gives you a view. It gives you an opportunity to have clarity into what your employees are currently doing. I think it's important, and thanks, Jeff, for bringing up this slide about the definitions. There are pieces that we need to be very clear about when we talk about the services in particular. When I talk about the National Criminal Record Search and the National Sex Offender Registries, these are both databases that have the repositories, if you will, that gets information from the various jurisdictions and provides that they're updated in a variety of different ways and timelinesses. But with those databases, we need to, if something does show up on it, it needs to be confirmed at the source, right? So when we're monitoring these, if there's a change, if something comes up on one of your employees, you know, that's an indication of potential that something has happened, but it needs to be researched further to ensure that it is in fact your employee. So that's where we would go into a county or statewide search. So, and this is where it becomes so important to pay attention to what exactly is being searched, how the record is researched if it is in fact your employee. So when we talk about a county or statewide, this is actually a search at the county or state level, or police repository for the federal the felony or misdemeanor records. That's how we can confirm at the source. A lot of times federal searches are confused with a national criminal record search, and there is a distinction here. Okay, again, the National Criminal Record Search is a repository of information from a variety of sources. Okay, a federal criminal record search is an actual confirmation type search from a district court. Okay, so we're actually researching at the court level using the same repositories utilized by the federal courts. And it's mostly on a white-collar crime, cross-border crimes, drug trafficking, extortion, kidnapping. So higher level offenses, but it's not singular to felonies. It's something that you need to understand the distinction here, because it's a good supplemental search, maybe not supplemental. It's a good search to give you more information about your employees that may not be covered under a county or statewide search, and potentially not under the National Criminal Record Search. Okay, so it's another level of search. Is that fair to say, Heidi?
Yep. Yeah. Just, I think sometimes people don't realize there's two different court systems in our country. There are state courts and there are federal courts, and then you throw in talk about a national criminal search, and everything gets confused. So just to be clear, there's state courts, and those are generally at the county, but sometimes there's a statewide court system or a police court system that we can use to get those. And then there's federal courts. That's what we get through PACER. Those are actual federal crimes that are prosecuted. And then the national searches are both databases. So they are just a proprietary set of information that sometimes we get from those counties or states, but they are not the county or the state themselves. So that's a little different.
Okay, and then the last area that we've been thinking about and hearing about are in terms of bringing back people that had a separation from your organization. These would be individuals that we would classify in the laid off distinction. Now, because of the nature of actually terminating, not for cause, but terminating these individuals, probably in good interest to do a complete background check again, because they're being rehired. So you want to follow your original policies of a new employee coming on board. So your new employee policies would want to be adhered to, including a drug test, including your Social Security trace, a variety of different pieces that you would normally follow, because they're starting over again, essentially.
Yep. And that's why it's going to be really important for employers to know, right? As I'm bringing this person back on, was it a furlough, basically a number of days or weeks where that person didn't work, but they were still technically an employee, or were they indeed laid off? And so there's a termination and rehire process that's happening. Obviously, you guys know, but take that one step further when you're thinking about your background check, right? The reason it's going to be really important is the Fair Credit Reporting Act requires disclosure and authorization when you do a background check prior to the background check, right? So that's going to be really important for your laid off employees that you're bringing back, because a previous disclosure and authorization probably would no longer be applicable, right? That was for that previous employment time. There was now an end in employment, and now you've got a new employment, and so you probably need to be making that new disclosure and authorization. think about that too from a policy standpoint. Even your furloughed employees, if you're doing rehire, again, a great time to be looking at your background screening policy to see what does it say about interruptions in employment, right? Is it specific enough for the circumstances we're living through today? Does it differentiate or identify the difference between a furlough and a layoff and rehire? And then there certainly are employers. I mean, this is not, we get it, this is not your first rodeo, you've done this before. Employers definitely have rehire. They might have policies and procedures or policies about, hey, for a gap of employment of X number of days, we don't need to do a new background check, or we do need to do a new background check. But as you're thinking about that, and as we start moving into a discussion about monitoring, one of the really key things that we talk to employers about when they're thinking about implementing a monitoring program, or help me guys, sorry, our product name.
A return to work, the Constant Connect.
Constant Connect, thank you. When you think about implementing Constant Connect is whether or not you've got an evergreen clause in your authorization to do the background check, right? So you get the authorization to do the background check pre-employment, you're good, you make a disclosure, you do the background check. Now if you're thinking about monitoring, you want to be looking back at your disclosure and authorization language to see, hey, did I get the candidate's authorization to do ongoing background screening? And so even if you have a policy that says, hey, I don't have to do a whole new background check on somebody who's returning to work from a furlough or being laid off if it's less than 10 days or 15 days or 30 days. But think about, do you have their authorization to do monitoring on that now returned employee moving forward, either now or in the future? And if you don't, maybe now is a good time to go ahead and make that disclosure again and get that authorization again, so you have it on file, right? So even if you're not going to do monitoring now, who's to say you won't want to next month or next quarter or next year?
Go ahead, Heidi. I just wanted to throw in, one last piece that we have heard about, and it just needs to be pointed out, is drug testing on current employees. There's a lot of state regulations around that, and so it becomes a very distinct area that you would need to check with your state and local policies, as well as your organization. So I wanted to put that out there. Typically, what we would recommend is only for those that are in that laid off category where there was a separation of employment, to do or implement any kind of mass drug screening item like that. So I just wanted, because we do hear about it, I just want to make sure that you are all aware that's something that needs to be paid attention to very clearly before you implement an ongoing with current employee drug testing.
Yeah, and the reason because it is, of course, that drug testing is a creature of state law, right? Just about every state's got some special requirement about drug testing, and especially the reason for drug testing, right? So there are many states that don't allow post-hire drug testing, except for, I mean, obviously if they're federally regulated, DOT, FMCSA, those types of positions. But then it has to be as part of a random program or a reasonable suspicion or return to work. So just drug testing a current employee, which might be what your furloughed employee is coming back from a furlough, could be an issue in state law. Probably less of an issue for your individual that was laid off and is actually separated or terminated and is returning to work, because that certainly falls into the definition, I think, of pre-employment. But just be a little careful too about that. I'm sure Jeff will talk about too. We have instant drug testing device solutions that are available as you're bringing people back into your office. That is certainly an option we can help you with, but again, be careful about thinking about your state law requirements around whether or not saliva specimen is allowed, whether or not an instant device is allowed, and or if it is allowed, whether or not there needs to be a lab confirmation. Those things are important, I think, for employers to be thinking about right now.
So we're kind of at the end of our time. We did announce these solutions that you see on your screen, implement these return to work solutions now. These are things that you can do now. We announced them about a month ago, and I think in a bit in hindsight, there was a lot of different things that employers were thinking about at that point in time that they're thinking about much differently 30 days later. For instance, the discussion point at the end of March was what we're facing with in business could be a V. Well, it looks like it's a different shape than a V, and we don't know exactly when, and it's going to vary probably by industry and a number of factors that we just don't even know yet. So maybe these solutions these are details. These are offerings that Dave can talk to you about, my sales team can talk to you about. All of us will be delighted to take you through how these might apply to you and what we're offering. And you can see here is some very attractive terms relative to a second quarter promotion, because we know people, you all as businesses, you didn't plan on this. You weren't expecting to have this budgetary hit if you had to pay for some sort of full background check to bring people back. So we have some ideas and some approaches here that can be budgetary friendly. They can also introduce you to the idea of monitoring to see if that is a fit for you. And if there are some things, if you're in the healthcare industry, DOT regulated drivers, maybe there's some very interesting points to explore there. More and more information, more and more capabilities daily. And then if you're not quite there and it's not the right fit, but you do want to run a simple criminal check, because one thing just seems to be obvious. You wouldn't run a full background check. Do you think verifications if someone's been gone for 90 to 180 days? You may, but for those of you who may not, you just want a simple, let's do a criminal check, make sure that the person fits the bill today like they did yesterday. We do have a very attractive return to work package there for less than $3, not including statutory fees, where we would confirm at the source on your behalf an employee on a criminal check. So just wanted to bring that to your attention as we're wrapping up. Is anything, we do have a question here. Let me see if I can read it. At this, I'm just going to read it live for us. At this time, we're hiring and have questions about, At this time, we're hiring and have questions about sending new hires for drug screens. Are there practices we should employ as we send new hires to labs?
So most labs are going to require a mask. That's a pretty common item right now. But other than that, the labs are well versed. I would recommend that all candidates call the lab prior to going to make sure that the wait time isn't too long. That would be the only other thing. But otherwise, labs are, they're labs, so they're following the appropriate CDC protocols. But the lab owners, the partners that we work with, have let us know that most will require a donor to wear a mask while they're at the lab providing their donation.
Dave, have you seen any change in hours? Are there some other things in addition to that, or is that just going to be best satisfied by having the candidate call and work all that out on a case by case basis?
There is evidence that some labs might have reduced their hours. It's not consistent across the board with all of them, but some have. So if you're an organization that has what we would refer to as a home lab, a location that you typically send your candidates to, it would be a good idea to have your candidates call to just confirm. Most of them have updated their websites, and then for those clients that have us do the scheduling, we'll only schedule a candidate within the lab. current lab hours. That's confirmed through the scheduling process. But most of the time, the call is to confirm how long of a wait time I'm going to have while I'm there. In this time, we're practicing the social distancing, so labs will ensure that they only have so many people within the lab at a given time. So there might be a line outside, and if it's raining or whatever, you just want to make sure that you're not standing outside in the weather, our beautiful spring weather.
So Dave, the recommendations you just mentioned, are they included on our standard forms, the processes that goes through Candidate Connect out to the candidate themselves on behalf of our clients?
It is. The phone call isn't, we recommend in all of our communications that, and our partners recommend in their communications as well, that the candidate call prior to. The mask piece is something that is a relatively new, so it's not updated on our communications yet, but we will get that taken care of.
Okay. Can I put you on the spot and ask you, do we have a time frame when we think that update will be made?
You can, and I'm not going to answer that. No, it will be this week. We'll take care of it.
All right, very good. Well, Dave, Heidi, thank you very much for your time today. For all of you that have joined, thank you very much for your time. It's a real privilege for us to spend some time with you. If you have questions that continue to emanate or surface, you just want to learn more about how you might prepare your business for the employees are coming back when the economy turns, be sure to reach out to us here at Orange Tree. Thank you very much, and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.